the income disparity become wide, it's very difficult to be good friends too. And of course, the most important one for today, the environment and climate change challenge, and our Mr. Saib has already explained. So these are some of the really major challenges. So if we are able to tackle this challenge, we believe the Asia would be able to have this Asian century. Otherwise, the income will come down to about 32%. And today, 32% of the GDP of the world. Today, Asia's GDP is about 28%, which means nothing. We will probably be in a middle income scenario. Now, let me now go back to this, the sustainability agenda for Asia. What is the policy context for environmentally sustainable growth? Now, here, I've tried this. If I'm wrong, Professor Koh can correct me because he's got the whole historical memory of what all happened. Everybody remember 1972? The Stockholm, Professor Koh, you do remember. I got my graduate degrees in environment in 1973-74. So I observed 1990-72 as a graduate student. What happened in 1990-72? Just before that, the U.S. EPA was established. That was 1970-1971. Let me put this kind of chart, which is probably easier to do this. The other one is a little bit complex. In 1970-71, U.S. EPA got established, the first one. Then the Stockholm came in. What was the focus in the Stockholm? It was human environment. It was the rights of the human family to a healthy and productive environment. Then, I'll pick few, 1982, 10 years after Rio. Between that period, lots of environmental agencies got established. All over, proliferation, I would say, establishment of the Environmental Office, Pollution Control Office, ministries of that type, and many laws, environmental laws were established around that, 82. So 10 years period was very, very interesting. That the laws, standards, regulations were developed in many of the countries. The need for the environmental legislation, lawyers became extremely important. It was really a time for them. In 82, Professor Kaur, this is you, UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. You worked from 74 to 82, and the laws of the sea was approved. To me, any environmentalist, air, water, land are important. And water, the fresh, and the sea. Therefore, this was to me one of the historical conventions as well. The next thing that's important to me is the 1987, when Brundtland report. What the Brundtland report brought to us is the whole world sustainable development. What does this mean? You do something today, keeping in mind of the future generation. This is also the first report where the economic policies, it was considered the economic policies had to be integrated with the sector policies so that you can make it sustainable. For example, you take an energy policy, put environmental issues, and then make it a sustainable energy policy. I think it gave to the birth of the environmental resource economies. This was the environmental economics really took birth at that time. Economists became resource economies. I see Professor Kwa here, I think one of the, from the NTU. Good to see you. So that, I really read that sustainable development as really from that perspective. Then we all know the 1992, all of us had been there to see the Agenda 21. And again, Professor, I think you served as the chair of the main committee, if I remember, of the UNCED, and you presided the negotiation of the Agenda 21. Thick document, difficult document. I can see the difficulty, but you did it. So that was the Agenda 21 came out, the Climate Change Framework Convention came in, the biodiversity came in, but we weren't able to get the forest there, Professor Kaur. We only had to settle for basic principles, we couldn't get a convention of the forest. That's why, to me, 92 is important. 1994 was very important. The Africans and others were talking about desertification. So we had a convention on desertifications. It was important for China. It was important for a few other Central Asia and Africa. 1990-70 was a very big milestone where we had the Kyoto Protocol. First time countries, developed countries, agreed for reduction. We were able to include the CDM, Clean Development Mechanism, as a part of that protocol. But there were a few things that was promised which obviously did not happen as we look today, but was a very, very important protocol and had a tremendous impact. 2002, which is Rio Plus 10, I probably can say that, although Professor Emil Salim, if we were here, he won't like it, he was the chair. I don't think we achieved much. We just took note that, okay, it was 10 years of Rio, and sometimes even with the best intent, you can accomplish certain things because of the geopolitics and other. So it was noted. And then the 2006 was important because the Stern report came in, it first time really put a good price on the economics of climate change. We all, unless you are able to put what percent of the GDP, etc., it's very difficult to get the attention of the decision makers. So this I would consider very important. I would consider the 2009 UNFCCC Copenhagen Accord important because that is where they talk about the Green Climate Fund, which is supposed to become in future $100 billion a year. At least the office got established now in Seoul. We have an office, we have an institution, we have some money, about 10 to 20, I think they committed about $10, $20 billion, which is a start, but the idea is to have $100 billion a year in future. People are looking for that money. We certainly are. 2009, to me, the OECD was important. The OECD declaration, the green growth, they started saying the importance of moving into the green growth path. 2010, the ESCAP and Incheon declaration supported that, and the ASEAN leaders did it. And the biodiversity one, 2010, was important. Next, Rio Plus 20. Obviously, this is another milestone where we have the future we want. We didn't get the climate change agreement, but it did talk about SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. It did talk about the green growth it brought in there. And just this year, I think that Japan was very successful in putting the Minamata Convention, which I think is a step forward to handle the mercury issues in the future. So looking ahead, we have to be very hopeful about the UNFCCC's agreement, maybe 1920, but definitely by 2015, as agreed before. This Green Climate Fund will be very critical, $100 billion a year, which will help us do all kind of adaptation work in future, including those projects which may not be viable but are needed, we could do it. And the next milestone, which is going to be important, is the post-2000 development agenda, which is at the moment, the report has come of the three wise men, and the SDG, Sustainable Development Goal report, will come in. When they merge, they will become one. So just to say that the MDG goals will become post-2015, SDG goals are being prepared. When they merge, then we will have another global agenda, which is to look at both, on one hand, the poverty and the minimum social flow, on one hand, on the other hand, the Sustainable Development Agenda. I will skip this in view of the time. This is from the MDG's report, and this is from the SDG. But one thing what we are trying to do at the ADB is trying to develop this approach. Now, if you have the MDG, which will say poverty, maternity, sanitation on one hand, fixing the low benchmark, and then you have the SDGs goal, which may be high. How do you reconcile? So approach which I'm working on at the moment together with the UN is called the GEN approach. First, let us put the minimum floor, zero extreme poverty type of standards. No more poor people, everybody gets to eat, everybody has water, sanitation, etc. Then the countries who want to do more than that, just like voluntary level, they can add on more. And this already happened in the climate change when you look at the NAMA, the voluntary commitment, countries like China, India making it, that we will reduce 40% of the CO2 per GDP by such and such date. And the third would be to take even the global issues and incorporate. So this Gen approach is being mentioned to the UN under discussion. This is how it looks like, but let me stop here on this one. The next thing I want to go therefore is the key environmental trends and drivers. Now, having talked the past, let's talk about how